say something that another person doesn't agree with. Thank you, Lisa. That another person doesn't agree with, and that's okay. So we're going to take our disagreements with grace, acknowledge our impact when we say something that might not be the best, and move forward together. All right, so as usual, our agenda is to listen, learn, and then lead. So we're going to go to our listen portion first today. We have been working in our policy committee in the Great Schools Thriving Communities Coalition on coming up with some messaging for the legislators who are currently running, or so new legislators and then incumbents who are currently running for the legislature, and asking them to support our teachers, right? In much the same way we did with 63. So this is a continuation of what we were doing before. Basically, what we have been talking about, and I'm going to show you some sample messages here in just a second. Whoops, sorry, I just lost it. Nope, there we go. So the idea with this is that we're picking up where we left off with 63, right? Voters still want this. They still want to pay teachers, and we know that. And GSTC, our coalition that we worked on this with, still wants to move forward. But now our chance is with the legislature, not on the ballot as it previously was. And number 3 right here, to make change at the legislature, candidates must be on board. So that's where we come in right now. So we've been coming up with some messaging in our policy committees, and some of it looks like this. This first one, we're demanding that you give voters the chance to support our teachers. Or number 2 right here, voters should have the chance to pay teachers more. So starting very generally, but what we're going to do is create an online action so that voters and advocates like you can sign it. And then our legislators, so in your districts, for example, legislative candidates will see this commitment right here. And we're asking them to take this with them to the legislature. So this is the first step of a multi-step process to get something passed through the legislature to pay our teachers more. So I'm going to go ahead and put us into breakout rooms. Whoops. Real quick. And I'm going to pause our recording. Welcome back. Thank you, Lisa. Welcome back, everyone. I got a chance to come in and be privy to some of the conversations that were happening. And I really enjoyed what I heard. So just for a few minutes here, we're just going to talk about what we talked about. So the idea was to look at that messaging that I displayed on the screen and then put in the chat and sort of come up with what kinds of things we think would be effective for legislators to hear to refer something, basically. And this is the first step in that, but it's getting them on board, right? So, for example, in the spirit of voters have made their voices clear, they want teachers to be paid more. And then what are you going to do about it is basically the question here. So I just want to hear some of the ideas that we came up with in our breakout rooms for the next 5 minutes or so. And I'm going to go ahead and write those down and just excited to hear. So I'll open up the conversation now and we can go ahead and whoever wants to start first can start. Sounds good.
Well, I'll jump in and say that our group talked about, I brought it up, that we're just starting the school year, but we're going to hear some stories about how things are really tough. You've got administrators covering classes and not doing their administrator job. You've got larger classes. You've got kids not being able to maybe get to school or can't take field trips. I'm not hoping for bad stories, but they will be there. And we need to share those with folks.
I think that's a great point. And it's like, I mean, it's a very different spin on what I put up there initially. But those things never get less important. And I think that the impact that they have now could be great. So thank you very much for that, Jan. Others?
I'll jump in for our room. We didn't really probably do what we were supposed to do, but we had a couple folks that are new, and we had a wonderful conversation. And one of the things was Roger brought up as he was at a candidate forum in Cortez, correct me if I'm wrong, Roger, or in Mancos. And all the candidates there agreed that public education is important and that things are not going well. So I think we talked about the fact that rural communities are, from our perspective, are definitely feeling it. It's close to home. But now I think also urban school districts are feeling it on a different level that maybe we were at a year or two ago. And that's why our momentum going forward is important. I think Wesley felt that, detail would be good, not to be too vague in what we're asking.
I really like, so Christy, one of the things I like that you said there is that there's sort of like this really palpable slide from like, this is where rural was, last year. And even just this year, this is where some of the more city focused districts are. And it's the same thing. And it's something that's affecting everyone. And it's worse than it's been. So I do like that because it brings in narrative. So thank you very much. Who's next?
Well, I think this is Sue Wendells from A for PEP. One thing is we learned in this last is that it's really hard to get something on the ballot without having a lot of money to pay volunteers. It's just such a task. So we should be focusing all of our groups with a single message to the legislature. And it would be nice if we could identify a senator and a representative who would be willing to carry a referendum on behalf of our organizations, especially if we're all working together with the same message. We talked about it in our board meeting about how we have a lot of groups and a lot of people that supported 63. The polling was great, but we were all in many ways working in silos instead of as one big collaborative group, which we've tried to do with the advocates that we're doing right now. But I think we need to do even more. And I think that the public is ready for us to put this on the ballot and support it.
Great, thank you very much, Sue.
Mm-hmm.
I think these are great so far. Do you have any others?
I'll jump in. I think one of the things we should do is look to see who were some of our friends in the legislature that either signed or carried the petitions, or who were advocates and just didn't take it to that next level. I know I talked to Mike Weissman yesterday, and and I said, we were talking about the number of things that are on the ballot, and we both kind of rolled our eyes to the fact that 63 didn't make it and how disappointing that is. And so looking to see who are some of those people. I can think of several people in the House. I'm not so sure I can think of very many in the Senate.
I would just, this is Lisa Weil with Great Ed, thinking about what Christy, you reported from Roger, that there is a place where there were a bunch of candidates who all said that public education is really important. That's what they are focusing on now. The polling indicates that's what they should talk about. And so it feels like there is a moment there. where you say, okay, and we're talking about creating a pledge form, say, love that you are all there for us. Will you pledge to make sure that the voters get a chance to help our teachers? What will you do? You know, will you sign and say you'll be part of making sure that voters get to do this? And it's great to hear, Roger, that's what they're talking about. And so that's just a really encouraging note. And I think if we can get to some of these, we won't be able to get all 100 legislators necessarily in the next 6 weeks. But if we can get to some key ones, both in terms, Nancy, what you're talking about is talking to some of our champions who would be doing the work and getting things drafted, but also some of the other folks who are going to be walking into the legislature with, it would be great if they're walking in knowing my constituents want me to do this and they're holding me accountable.
I guess I don't understand, if I may, you would be asking the legislatures to make it where we could vote. What would they be doing? What would they be allowing us to vote? I'm not understanding the logistic of what you're talking about.
That is a great question, and it's one of the craziness of running a state by popular vote on these tax issues. But we know we tried to put 63 on the ballot and we weren't able to. There's only one, but we knew the voters wanted to. So the one way that our desire to help our teachers can come about is with the legislators referring it. Now, your question is, what exactly are they referring? And that's part of the messaging and trying to figure out, if we get too detailed, they can say, well, I like the idea, but I have a problem with this thing. I think and this is one of the messagings that we really need to come up with, is being definite enough that we're asking actually something of them, but broad enough that we're really asking them to commit to values. Will you let voters help students and help teachers? Hope that helps.
Shannon?
Thanks. So I guess looking at the language of 63, it is a little bit more ambiguous as far as it says compensating teachers and special or student support professionals, 12th preschool through 12th grade education. But the language that I'm hearing tonight is teachers, right? And so I guess from a parental standpoint, I have 2 kids in school. Where I see it and seeing it in the schools is it's bus drivers, right? It's paraprofessionals. It's hitting everywhere, right? It's not just teachers. And so if you can't get your kid on the bus, then you have to drive your kid to school, and then it becomes the issue, or you don't have you guys get it. So I guess to your point, Lisa, I know you don't want to be so pedantic to say, we want paraprofessionals, or we want bus drivers, or we want, pay. But on the other hand, I think that if we just say teachers, I think that also paints a different picture, right? And so I do think that it has to be a choice of either support education or, pre-K through 12, or something that is, in my mind, a little more encompassing, or have, and this is the risk, have maybe 1 or 2 messages that would be a carve out, like, hey, we're going to get those bus drivers to get our kids to school. Or again, I'm not a marketer, I'm not in advertising, I'm not whatever, but really that hones in on what are the specifics of education and why is education important. So I just, that's all I'm struggling with tonight, is I keep hearing teachers, but it's more than teachers. And teachers, it's more than, it's the custodians, the nurses, the CNAs, the paras, so just throwing that out there too.
No, I think that's an excellent point, Shannon. And that, so that when we were running the measure we're trying to get the measure on the ballot. So it was teachers and student support professionals. So which encompasses those different roles that you were talking about. And I think that to bring those forward here would be a good idea, because it shows, one, it's telling the truth, and two, it shows the breadth of the effects of this lack of money. So thank you for bringing that up.
I also think, pardon me, I also think that's where it's showing up the most to people, because when you can't get your kid to school, when they're not getting school lunches, the side effect of that is teachers are having to take up those roles. And so, I mean, it's a snowball. So yeah, I agree with Shannon. We need to be very, very careful and continue to include student support professionals in all of our discussions. I think we just truncated to teachers for sake of conversation, but I don't think that's what we mean here, unless I'm missing the boat.
And this is Joe Mauser. I would have to agree. In all of the petitioning gathering that I did over the summer, if I said it was teachers, it's your bus driver, it's the cafeteria workers, and everyone was like, yeah, like I see that the schools, they don't have any bus drivers. Everybody can see that there are no bus drivers. Every single school district is affected by the fact that there are no bus drivers, and people are changing schools because there are no bus drivers. So I think just focusing on teachers is probably not the best thing, because when you say teachers, certain people of a certain mindset fire back with, well, what about the unions? Whereas bus drivers don't have that level of protection, and people have a little bit more empathy for them, and empathy for parents who can't get their kids to school.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. All right, so I am gonna move us on. I think this is a great conversation. What I'm gonna do is go ahead, I have notes here, and we're gonna go ahead and use these in consideration of our messaging. We really value all of you and your input. That's why we have breakout rooms, and that's why we have discussions afterwards. And like, this is a bunch of stuff that a bunch of people who like work in policy groups haven't thought of the past couple weeks. So thank you very, very much for that. And for just showing up and having these conversations with us. I am going to go ahead and, because we are approaching the ballot pretty rapidly, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lisa in just a second to talk about our public education voter campaign. All right, Lisa.
All right. So since 2019, Great Ed has worked with our partners in putting together sort of the slate of public education votes for each year to sort of make sure that thread goes through folks. We provide that lens for people to consider. And sometimes it's obvious that a bill is or a ballot measure is very related to education. But as is the case this year, there are some that are going to have a big impact on education, but may not be obvious. And so bringing that connection. So Ben, if you can go to the next slide. So we're encouraging people to always go to the ballot with that filter, with that lens in mind. And the next slide indicates just sort of the general guidelines that we have. Yes on measures that will prevent cuts now and in the future. Yes on measures that secure more funding for public education. No on measures that make cuts to education funding now or in the future. And again, we no on measures that implement an unfunded mandate, meaning that the proponents may try to get us to think that a problem is solved, but that problem is only coming at the expense of something else that districts don't have funding for. So this year there are 3, and we'll be having our slate in that visual coming up soon, but we are supporting FF, GG, and opposing 121. So starting off with Prop GG, I could explain it, but instead we're going to use the campaign's 30 seconds and then can answer any questions about it.
Great, thank you.
In Colorado, when we vote on new tax proposals, we see the cost right on our ballot. But there's no requirement to show voters who pays or how much. Proposition GG fixes that to give you the full picture of how tax changes we vote on will impact you. GG requires a table on your ballot with 8 income levels, showing what you pay in taxes now and how that'll change under the proposal. Get the full picture. Vote yes on GG.
Thanks, Ben. So this this builds on some legislation that made the ballot more informative.
Colorado, when we vote,
And we'll get back. We had legislation a couple years ago that made the ballot more transparent and more informative by having to say, you know, when we, like the video says, if there is a tax increase, the first words, because of the Constitution, have to say, shall taxes be increased by total $1 billion, all in capital letters. That can't be changed. That's what the Constitution says until we change the Constitution. But what we could do is add more information. And so now when there's a tax cut, you have to say what the impact could be on the ballot and what are the top 3 funding priorities that would get cut if that tax cut happens. What this adds is that graph. It adds that chart. And it really is about providing unbiased, objective information to voters. Why is that a public education vote? It's because the more people know, the better decisions they can make. Colorado voters are our tax policy makers. And when they understand who is paying a tax and where dollars might be going if a tax is being cut, then the more information we have, the better it is for our schools. And you know, that's what we see in the polling, is that people really approach a conversation about a tax differently if they know more than this will cost the state of Colorado $1.6 billion. When they have more information and can join that with what the dollars are for, we will get better informed decisions. Right now, the thumb is on the scale for no, and this really evens it and makes it possible for us to you know, if this were the language, if we had been able to do this with Amendment 73 back in 2018, it's very likely it would have passed, because people wouldn't have been looking at the whole price tag, but they would have had a better understanding of what it meant to them. In most cases, it would have increased their taxes 0. Any questions about GG? Okay, we're going to go to FF. GG and FF were both, the reason that they have the letters rather than numbers is because they were referred by the legislature. And the fact that they're all propositions mean that they are just statutory, not constitutional. So FF is Healthy School Meals for All. And we touched on the importance of nutrition, the people who support our kids. One of the things that this would do is it allows every student to be eligible for free lunches that are locally sourced. Removing the stigma from the lunchroom is one of the key points about this, because it's a real equity issue that, if any of you can sort of remember, this is the way that kids get identified as free and reduced lunch. It is stigmatizing, and so it removes that. It reduces administrative costs for schools. It also is going to pay, it's not in this list, but it does make it possible to pay nutrition workers more. Christy, I know that you've talked about the fact that you haven't been able to have a lunchroom last year because you couldn't find the nutrition workers. So it's going to do that. It eliminates lunch debt, which you may have heard in the newspapers about. And of course, making sure that every student is not hungry means that they are ready to learn, that they are more welcome, they are feeling better about their education and are more just ready to be more attuned to classes. The money for it comes from by capping state income tax deductions for those with incomes about $300,000. It's really important to know that if somebody is giving a lot of money because of this would be like the charitable deduction, everybody will still get their federal deductions. And so the fact that the state deductions get capped for a small percentage of Colorado taxpayers will not make a big difference there. It is a progressive proposal. It's not like a flat tax, which the less you make, the higher percentage you pay. So that is why Great Schools Thriving Communities has endorsed it, and why we believe it's a yes vote is for public education. Any questions or people who know other things about that, about FF, that they might want to comment? Okay, so the last one, brought to us by John Caldera and the Independence Institute. And what it would do, and this is really important, the language is there at the top. This language was grandfathered. They got that I told you that there's new language that is required by statute that says, you know, this is how much would be cut from the budget, and these are the things that would be affected. John Caldera got title for this before that law was passed. And so all it says is, shall there be a change to the Colorado revised statutes reducing the state income tax rate from 4.55 to 4.4. Doesn't sound like a lot, but for the 22-23 year, it is $638 million. Now, in the future, that number will be on the ballot, but this year he got away with this very simple, you want to cut your taxes? It's this easy. The loss of that revenue, they're saying, oh, it doesn't cost anything because we're in Tabor surplus. Those are dollars that the state bothers to collect, and then they have to give it back. And why bother? Just don't turn, let's not have that revenue in the first place. That is revenue that if we had Initiative 63 on the ballot, would have been available to put into the state education fund to pay for teachers and student support professionals. So when we take $638 million out of that, that is $638 million permanently, ongoing, because that rate can't go up without another vote of statewide voters. Those dollars will be lost forever, and that's not the revenue that we could from that surplus revenue that we can seek to direct to teachers, for instance, through this referred ballot measure that we are working to get proposed and passed by the legislature. This is a very regressive tax. A flat tax sounds like it's fair, but it is in fact, you can see here, 75% of taxpayers are going to get an average a tax cut of less than 63%. 3 out of 4 taxpayers will get less than $5 or about $5 or less a month. Those with $1 million plus incomes, which is less than 1% of our taxpayers, are going to get 50% of the total dollars. And it provides a tax cut for out-of-state corporations. So it is not helpful to those who are the most affected by the inflation, et cetera. It gives the biggest relief to those at the top of the income chain. And so this is a big no for public education voter. And this one is probably the hardest one. There's not going to be much of a campaign because everybody just thinks it's going to pass. But we did polling that shows that as soon as you tell people that this is taking that kind of money away from possibly being used for schools, it plummets. But if there's no campaign, the only way we're going to be able to defeat it is by word of mouth and by promoting these public education voter materials that will be made available within the next couple of weeks. Any questions about 121? This, by the way, used to be Initiative 31. If you were hearing that Initiative 31 is bad, it once you qualify for the ballot, they give it a proposition name. So that is that's why this is 121. Thoughts, questions? Fury? Okay. Well, those are among the things you'll see on the
Sorry.
ballot, but that's what public education voter will be this year.
I couldn't unmute fast enough. Complete disdain. I don't know how to put it, to see Caldera be able to continually put things on the ballot year after year after year that we cannot, and he said he will, that we can't fight because the message is so simple, like Tabor. Just say no, it's your dough. But that's why the transparency bill is so important, that people can see the table.
And I would encourage people to look at what Kansas did under Sam Brownback. This is exactly what happened, and you can't get it back. You can't go back to the people and to the voters and say, oh, oops, we made a mistake. These are the repercussions that happened. And with Tabor on top of that, it would be even worse than what Kansas went through. It's devastating.
Spoken as a Kansan, you know.
Yeah.
So, Lisa, there's no campaign, no campaign at all.
I think there's been something registered that has like $1 in it at the moment, but there are so many other things on the ballot, and it's the same. You raised the issue that John Caldera can put something on the ballot anytime because he's got deep pockets where he has an idea and says, I'm going to put everybody on the defensive. And by the way, one of the other organizations that is supporting 121 is called Path to Zero. That is their campaign name. And what they mean is the path to zero income tax. So they've got the funding. They are able to put something on the ballot. And what our side is always doing is playing defense, and they look at the polling, not our polling, but just polling that makes it look, how are we going to fight that? We just don't have time. We don't have, it would cost so much to fight it. I don't believe that it would cost that much to fight it. It was very soft support, but we seem to, the Bell is speaking out against it. The Colorado Fiscal Institute is speaking out against it, but there is not a formal campaign. We are public education voters, kind of the closest thing to a no campaign.
Well, we need to, as advocates, need to make sure that we're putting this word out in every arena we possibly can to show that if you want to pay teachers more, if you're really interested in public education, this is incredibly damaging.
It is. So I think, to prevent this from happening, to do our level best to make sure that we don't have this kind of fiscal catastrophe, and also that we get those other things passed. What we've been doing for the past couple of years now is establishing texting campaigns. So we get people from all around the state, and we have a sort of a texting platform that we get for a number of weeks. And we have people, we bring them together actually in person or remotely to text other voters about these measures and why, for example, they should vote no on Prop 121 and why they should vote yes on FF, GG, so forth. So we want to give you that opportunity to do that again this year. So Lisa was nice enough to make a sign-up form today, which I will be putting in the chat moment. Or actually, Lisa, could you share that in the chat, please? So that we can get a jump on winning the two that we want to, and that we need to, and defeating the one that we absolutely have to, right? And so in the coming weeks, we're going to be sort of blasting this out to our people on social media, on via email. But we want to get as many signups, obviously, as fast as we can. And so if you're interested in doing that, Lisa's going to put an interest form in the chat. And there are a couple of different volunteer options, and I'd love for you to indicate the one or ones that you are most interested in, and click that little submit button at the bottom. And
I swear it's coming.
we can get you involved. I'll just keep talking now. So if you could just fill that out, that would be great. I'm gonna also include that in the next in the coming Advocates Network emails. But that is our show for tonight. We are just a few minutes early, but I want to thank everybody for coming out on an odd day, and also thank you for your grace with me as a first-time facilitator. And we will be back to our regularly scheduled programming, so second Tuesday of the month in October.
Okay, I got it. So that's the form link. Sorry about that delay. I put it in a smart place, which is why I didn't find it. And I'm also going to put next month's, so nope, I don't have. I'm trying to, Ben, maybe you can put in next month's Advocacy Network link as well.
Yep, I can certainly do that. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and we will.
Lisa, I'm just gonna say I clicked on that link for the forums and it says I need permission.
I tried to fix that. Okay.